People are always asking me, Dax, what's it like to wake up in the morning and know this is the first thing you have to do? My answer to that is, I don't wake up in the morning. If anything, I'm just going to bed. I'm Dax, and I'm happy to announce What's Under the Bed is an official affiliate of Fangoria magazine. What does that mean for you? Savings! That's what it means. Go to shop.fangoria.com or follow the links in the description. Use the code What's Under the Bed with Dax and get 20% off your entire order. That applies to first-time subscribers and one-time orders. That's 20% off all the Fangoria swags. Pins, hats, shirts, mugs, beanies, and horror mags. What code? What's Under the Bed with Dax? Which one? What's Under the Bed with Dax? I can't tell you how excited we are at What's Under the Bed to be involved with Fangoria. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Now, enjoy this week's interview. Today's guest, along with his family, is ubiquitous in film and television over the past 50 years. With his parents and brother, they have more than 730 credits. 250 of those belong to our guest. He's one of the greatest, most beloved character actors of all time. He's Clint Howard. I'm thrilled to have him with me today. Clint, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Dax. It's, the pleasure is mine. I enjoy, boy, your enthusiasm and getting an opportunity to have a chat is wonderful for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's start just before the beginning. You were born in Burbank, California, but family legend says you were conceived in Las Vegas. Can you tell me about that?
Well, now come on, Dax. You know about the birds and the bees. I can't tell you about how I was conceived. At least if I tell you, that would be weird, wouldn't it? Well,
it would, yes.
As the family story goes, in 1958, in the summer of 58 or the spring of 58, it was the summer of 58, mom and dad made a migration from New York City to Burbank. They were going to settle. My dad's agent, Archer King, back in New York at the time, he actually encouraged my dad to leave New York and try his business in Los Angeles. So they packed up their vehicle, threw Ron in the back seat. And back in those days, I mean, you grew up in the era of child seats. In the 50s and the 60s, they just literally threw kids in the back seat and off they went. So anyway, I hadn't come along yet. They're driving along cross country, and as mom would tell the story, they were doing so well at driving and saving their money that they thought they'd stop and spend a night in Las Vegas. And they did spend a night in Las Vegas. And all we know, and all I've done the research on, is go back. It was about 9 months later. 9 months later, I was born in Burbank, California, April 20th, 1959. So what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas all the time now, does it?
It doesn't. Before the influence of movies, what scared you the most as a child? Was there a fear of the dark or a monster under the bed?
It was clowns. It was I don't know, back in the 60s, everybody used to have like painted clown pictures in their house, nice oils of clowns. And so I remember specifically thinking this clown was kind of creepy and asking Dad if they could take it down. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is a long, long time ago, Dax. I remember hearing about how clowns were creepy. So it had been placed in my head that clowns were creepy. And in fact, but I did. I asked Dad to take this clown off the wall, and he did. And there it is. So that's my memory of my first scare as a child.
Many kids are first introduced to horror through children's stories or Grimm's fairy tales like Billy Goat's Gruff or Little Red Riding Hood. Was there any children's stories that scared you as a child?
No. no, I didn't have any of those moments where I was scared. I was not scared for Little Red Riding Hood. I thought that was a cool story. You know, the wolf's out there, the wolf's dangerous. I was not saying, don't do it, don't go. You know, see, I I've been in the storytelling business. I've been involved in the filmmaking business literally all of my life. I do not remember when I wasn't. So to me, it's all a story. And so, you know, no, you know, even Bambi, my goodness, even Bambi, that, you know, I didn't shed a tear. It's animation, for crying out loud. You know, that's, I mean, I remember thinking that when I was a kid, cartoons, you know, like, oh, no, it's just a cartoon. So anyway, the answer is no.
You've co-authored a wonderful book with your brother Ron Howard called The Boys, which we have back there. There are two great stories in that might explain what you were like as a child. Would you tell me how Ron would read you sports scores when you were kids? Then would you also explain the story where he began calling you the hee-hee man?
Sure, Dax. The listening to the box scores, listening to the trials and tribulations of the Los Angeles Dodgers was a memory that I have with my older brother, that I have it. It's fleeting, but I have it. It's ingrained in my head, but it's not going to go away. And that is that Ron being 5 years older. So let's just say at the time he was 9 and I was 2. No, he was not. He was 8 and I was 3. And I don't know the exact moment of this, but he had learned how to read. He had fallen in love with the Dodgers. And that story, that Dad thought it was really important that Ron assimilate into the community as best he could, you know, and I was just literally a toddler. But Ron started working on the Andy Griffith Show. Ron had a fascination with baseball, and Dad cultivated that. And so a wonderful exercise for Ron, or for any child growing up, is reading the newspaper. Every day, there's a fresh set of words, there's a fresh set of numbers, there's fresh stories that a child can look at and absorb the information. Well, so Ron was doing that. Ron had a routine of waking up in the morning before Mom and Dad, feeding the family cat, whose name was Mitts. And the reason why the cat's name was Mitts is because it had like an extra claw. So it looked like his claws, Mitts's claws, looked like a catcher's mitt. So he would wake up, he would bring in the newspaper, and he would feed Mitts. Now, after he would feed Mitts, he would take that newspaper and he would go into the hallway of we had a little 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in Burbank. He would lay down in the hallway in front of the wall heater. This is a gas wall heater, and where just the hot air just kind of pumps out from sort of the floor. And he would lay there and read the newspaper. Well, that would be about the time I would wake up, and I would crawl out of bed, walk into the hallway and climb onto his back. And I would sort of lay down on my big brother's back, and I would listen to him as he would read the box scores and read, like I said earlier, you know, the trials and tribulations of our favorite team at the time, Los Angeles Dodgers. And I don't remember this part, but I believe, Ron, everybody kind of thought I was a math whiz. Later on, when I started going to school, I could add numbers real fast. I could do baseball calculations. I could do batting averages off the top of my head. And at first they thought I was some sort of a genius. And what it was is, no, I was collecting baseball information at an extremely young age. I was sorting out, well, when somebody is gets 3 hits in 9 at bats, that's a .333 batting average. That's rudimentary stuff. But it worked in my head that it, you know, I could do it kind of at an accelerated level. So that was, and the memory of me laying on my brother's back and feeling him and smelling him and listening to his voice as he would talk about, you know, Tommy Davis and Willie Davis and Maury Wills. And those are memories that I swear they're beautiful memories in my head. And I'm really glad that I have them. Now, as far as the Hee Man story, I'm not sure exactly when this happened. It was about in that same era when I was probably, you know, 2 years old, maybe 3. And Ron was, of course, again, you know, 7 or 8 years old. That we had been arguing over something, whether it be, you know, who had the Lincoln Logs or the baseball cards or something. It was something. And now I don't have any real vivid recollection of this. This is one of those things also. I do have a moment of kind of remembering it, but I'm honest to God not sure whether I'm remembering hearing the story or remembering the actual moment. But anyway, Ron was minding his own business up, laying on his bed, playing with something. And all of a sudden, I climbed up onto the bed and got over him, pulled down my little diaper, and started peeing right on my brother. I thought that, you know, peeing was like having a squirt gun. I thought it was a water toy. I had discovered it and says, boy, this, you know, fun liquid shoots out of this thing. I can just, wow, look at this. So when the moment that I did that and I was hitting him with my stream of urine, I was arching my back and laughing. And at that point, Ron, he didn't think it was funny at the time. He expected Dad to punish me. And Dad said, no, Ronnie, I'm not going to punish your brother because he doesn't know better. He doesn't know that, and we're going to teach him that that's not the right thing to do. But right now, he doesn't know. He thought it was a water gun, you know. So anyway, he calls me the Hee Man. He still to this day will, once in a while in an email, he'll answer me, or he'll, you know, start an email off by saying, Hee Man, what's going on?
You became known for roles in some iconic horror movies later in your career. Were you a monster kid, or did you like scary movies growing up?
Not at all. Monsters, science fiction, something that was that has always been far off of my bullseye of my personal interest and taste. The closest thing well, the thing that brought kind of horror characters and stuff into our family was, well, of course we were in the business. So, you know, we knew Frankenstein's monster and we knew, you know, Dracula. And of course, all kids knew all those characters. But we knew them as characters in movies. And that my dad was friends with a guy named Tim Barr. Tim Barr was an slightly older man, and he had bought a prop house, which means he had bought a business that had props, and that business specified that business was that the specialty was old monster props. And Tim Barr, that business went under. And it went bankrupt or whatever. I'm not sure the details of it, but anyway, he had an auction to get rid of all of his old monster props. And Dad, in support of his friend, bought a fair amount of the props, and he put them in a duffel bag and he hung them in the garage, and we had access to them. And they were just old cheesy B movie, the mask of a werewolf and that sort of stuff. It wasn't any sort of high-end stuff. It wasn't worth keeping. It was just good stuff to play with. As far as me growing up, you know, of course, this is going to really date me. And it also just shows you the sign of the times. And I'm not saying this is right, because it's not. But, you know, we played war. We played, put on the World War II Army equipment and run around out in the backyard or run around out in the front yard with guns that frighteningly looked real, you know, and pretend to shoot each other, pretend to play army, you know, which in this day and age, Jesus, that scares the bejesus out of people. But that's what we did when we were kids. And also, too, here's another one that is very politically incorrect, but it's just a fact. I don't want to deny it, is we played cowboys and Indians. Jesus, I mean, that's pretty rude, you know, cowboys and Indians. But that's, you know, we played those games. You know, it really wasn't until that we developed a fascination for sports, that we traded in our cowboys and Indians outfits and our army stuff. And we started, you know, playing wiffle ball and over the line and playing basketball, which of course is a lot healthier, you know. You can't make a lot of money in life doing cowboys and Indians.
Yeah. Did your parents have any restrictions on what you were able to watch as a kid?
No, not watch at all. It wasn't that wasn't it. We didn't, you know, we had curfew for a while. It was, I mean, we were not free to just stay up willy-nilly throughout the night. It was time to go to bed. It was time to go to bed. But no, anything that was on television was completely, you know, on limit. So no, you know, and in fact, I can go a little more into a little detail about that. You know, about myself and Dad personally, about my boundaries, is what I could watch and what I could experience. But no, we didn't have anything, you know, like, no, it's a scary movie, you can't watch. Because Dad and Mom, although you know, we always say Dad because, you know, first of all, you know, Dad worked with us as actors. So we were really close to him. We were close to Mom too, but Mama would always kind of take a step back and let Dad sort of be the point person in raising the boys. Hence the name of the book. When Ron and I were talking about, well, what are we going to call our memoir about childhood? And there's only one name, and that's The Boys, because that was a name that Mom coined us. Mom coined the three of us, me and Dad and Ron, The Boys. And so, you know, and Dad referred to us as the boys, and we were the boys. But about restrictions and about growing up and watching stuff, you know, I remember seeing my first nudie movie. It was a really memorable moment for me. And it wasn't until I was probably about 12 years old, you know, that Dad just felt it was about time to expose us to, you know, it wasn't pornography. It was a movie with Barbara Hershey, and it was a movie about, people would have to look it up. It wasn't Endless Summer, The Long Summer, or something like that. And Dad recognized it had nudity in it, and Dad just felt like it was time to expose me to that part of what we do for a living, and what we do for a living as actors, it's all just make believe, you know. You want to make it look as real as possible, but it is all just make believe. So I remember that. I remember seeing, and it was Barbara Hershey, and you know, we worked with Barbara Hershey, and so, you know, we knew her, and it wasn't like, oh, stare at her breasts. It wasn't about that. It was just, you know, Dad was so beautiful at giving us instructions in life, at giving us, you know, having almost every moment be a teachable moment. And I'm so blessed that he was like that, you know, Dad, when all throughout our childhood, all throughout working on a movie set, you know, Ron and I were both, and I can't really speak for him here, only because I know through experience and know through writing the book that he had these same shared experiences as me, but that you know, Dad was so beautiful at making our lives a learning situation. And when you have a kid in the movie business, it's very much an adult world. You know, my goodness. And it's not just about the cursing. It's not just about, you know, potentially seeing things that kids shouldn't see. It was just the whole environment. I mean, it's an adult world. And to drop a child into that adult world, it takes a lot of extra parenting. And mom and dad were just superior at giving both Ron and I that extra parenting.
You became a professional actor on December 6th, 1961. It was a Wednesday. Who was Leon on the Andy Griffith Show, and where did the idea of eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches come from?
Time out, Dax. That's a hell of a piece of journalism. To be able to, because you're right, to be able to uncover the date in which I acted back in 1961. And the fact what day of the week it was a Wednesday. That's pretty good, right in the middle of the week. Well, so I didn't have to stress too much before, and I didn't have to stress. It's good to work on hump day. You see, my life is brilliant. I mean, not brilliant. My life, you know, everything worked out well, because that would be the day I would choose to work. You know, I wouldn't want to work on Monday. I wouldn't want to work on Friday. Let's work on Wednesday. That's cool. So anyway, yeah, I worked on the Andy Griffith Show, and honest to God, Dax, I don't have any memories of that. Of course, through the stories, I have experiences of listening to the stories and the, you know, knowing the people around those stories. You know, because it did revolve around the Andy Griffith Show. But I know the first episode of the Andy Griffith Show that I ever appeared in, it had nothing to do with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I was just an extra. I was just a character at a dance at a Mayberry social, and I've seen the episode several times, and I think it's actually really good. I for being a little 2.5-year-old kid, I acted well, and so but they were having a dance. And it was the episode was about kind of the men of Mayberry against the women of Mayberry. And there was conflict. There was social boy-girl conflict. And at the end, everything worked out. So the final scene was this dance. And the camera is panning the crowd, and everybody's having a good time. And then the camera pans and then has to pan down. And I'm there, and I'm 2 years old, and I can barely stand up well, I'm 2 years old. So the camera pans down and sees me, and I'm leaning up against the door jamb of the doorway. And I got a big smile on my face, and it looks like this character, little Leon, is checking out the girls and enjoying himself at the square dance too. And then meanwhile, another extra, an adult, a man, hides my eyes, scoops me up, and pulls me out of the shot like I'm seeing too much. So it was a fun moment. It worked. You get a laugh. You can't help but laugh at this moment. And then I think the next time they showed me in the Andy Griffith Show was a bit where I offered one of the citizens of Mayberry a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now I'm not sure whether it was Barney or not, but
It was Barney, I believe. I
believe
it was
well,
Barney.
And I'll tell you, I was, and I still am, a huge advocate for PB&J, and in particular, PB&J grape jelly. I've always been a grape jelly guy. I do not like strawberry jelly. Strawberry jelly has those little tiny seeds, and it feels like that some of them could get stuck in your gums, and that's not good. So I'm a peanut butter and grape jelly person, and you know, it must have been, I don't know, you know, how they came up with it. They obviously saw me eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and thought it was cute. I probably was wearing quite a bit of it on my face, which little 2- and 3-year-old kids are prone to do. So anyway, that was that. And again, I don't have any memories of actually acting on the show, but I do know what a warm and comfortable environment Desilu Coanga was. That's the studio where we shot, where the Andy Griffith Show got shot. What a wonderful, warm environment that the place was, and the people were. This is something that Ron and I talk about. I talked about it in the book. There was never any negativity that ever was brought home from the Andy Griffith Show. And working on a regular television show, that is unheard of. To think that there is no BS that gets brought home from the workplace is, you know, one of those things that you go, no, that can't happen. Because I'll tell you, like, you know, I mean, sometimes comedy ends up being causes, I don't know, wait, let me say this right. It's not that comedy causes conflict, but a lot of conflict arises from people trying to create comedy. You know, and you know, Happy Days, Ron and everybody on the show, on the set of Happy Days, as we wrote about in the book, had quite a bit of conflict going on. But on the Andy Griffith Show, no, it was such a wonderful environment. Ron's studio teacher, Mrs. Barton, she was a champ. Andy was a champ. Don was a champ. The prop guy, and I'm gonna brain lock on the prop guy's name right now, but God, he was such a great guy. Back in those days, it was the prop man that made like special goodies for people. And I know once I was hanging around, you know, the prop man would make pies and make stuff, you know, that I could enjoy. And that the prop room was the go-to place. And Lee Greenway, who was the makeup guy. I may be getting some of these names wrong, but you know, they're not wrong in my heart. It was a great environment.
Your family lived in Hollywood for a while before settling at a house with a pool on Cordova Street in Burbank. I've read that your mom didn't enjoy cooking. She made her staples like meatloaf, ham, fish sticks, and hamburgers, usually with macaroni and cheese and or mashed potatoes. Often the family would pile into the 1952 Plymouth Cranbrook or later the red Chevy Nova Super Sport and eat dinner at the Sizzler in Culver City, Patty's Restaurant, or the King's Arms medieval-themed restaurant where Shirley Temples were plenty and there was a sword and a stone in the main entrance. You took family vacations to Apple Valley Inn, run by Roy Rogers and filled with Western kitsch. You attended Robert Louis Stevenson Elementary School. You played softball, basketball, and kickball at Vertigo Park. And you and your brother would roughhouse and bond over wrestlers with names like Gorilla Monsoon, Haystacks, Calhoun, or The Sheik. Your dad would thump either of you on the head if you acted up. For a family in film, this sounds pretty normal.
It was, Dax. We had, you know, an extraordinarily normal life, at least to me. Now, we had jobs. Most kids in our neighborhood didn't have jobs when they were really small. A few did. I had a friend of mine who worked at his parents' restaurant. I had my best friend, Scott Green, growing up, he delivered newspapers. I believe Scott Howell, he also delivered newspapers. You know, I believe a lot of the kids delivered. They were back in those days, it was the afternoon paper. So after school, a kid would have, you know, 80 or 100 newspapers delivered to their porch. And their job would be to fold them up, put rubber bands around them, put them in their sack and pedal around the neighborhood and deliver the newspapers. So it was a job. You know, we had jobs, but that was, you know, otherwise us, in our day-to-day existence as Howards in Burbank, it was all really normal. The Sizzler, of course, the Sizzler started in Culver City, but immediately the franchise expanded to one in Burbank. And I'll tell you, it's the Sizzler in Burbank no longer exists, but the building is there. And every time Kat and I, she's my wife, every time we drive down Hollywood Way, going to and fro to our home, we drive by the Sizzler, and I remember so well those times where we would go out and have dinner. And also the King's Arms. The King's Arms was an independently owned and operated restaurant, and they served liquor, and which the Shirley Temples, which, you know, the Shirley Temples was the Shirley Temples is, of course, cherry juice and maybe grenadine and ice and some 7-Up and one of those little umbrellas, you know, that make it look like a cocktail. And so, you know, you're right about we would dine there probably, you know, once a month. Mom was not a great cook, and although she wasn't bad, you know, she didn't burn toast. She wasn't bad, but she didn't get into it. And, you know, like, she came out of the Depression. My mom came out of an era when people learned how to can food. And so they thought canned food was just the best, you know. So we had all of our fruits and vegetables. It was out of a can, you know. And she had, like you said, and you said it so well, you know, she had her staples of food that she cooked. One bonus thing that she did that we really loved doing, when Mom would do this, we thought it was great. She would go to Vaughn's supermarket and buy a frozen pizza, which back in those days, and even today, a frozen pizza from the market doesn't quite cut it. But she would spice it up. She would also buy a couple of steaks. She would get a big frozen pizza, and then she would grill steaks and then slice the steaks really fine, and we would have steak pizza and a salad. And it was you know, those were wonderful times. I, like any kid, I don't know how you were when you were a kid, even if you will admit it or not, you know, finicky eaters. I had the same issues as anybody else. I am so normal. You know, Mom and Dad had to basically bribe me to eat my green beans, you know, and, you know, eat 4 green beans and you can have dessert, you know. And I'd have to choke down those green beans, but I wanted my dessert. So I'd eat my 4 green beans so I could have dessert. And interestingly enough, there is one, and this is the power of television. There is one vegetable that I had no issue eating. In fact, I love to eat it. I wanted to eat it, and I still eat it. And that's spinach. And that's because Popeye ate spinach. You know, every cartoon, that the big climax of the cartoon would be Popeye would be in a dilemma, and he'd have to pop open a can of spinach. He'd eat it, and then he'd kick butt, you know. And so anytime, if they really needed me to have vegetables, Mom would pop open a can of spinach, put a little butter on it, serve it up, and I'd have no problem eating the spinach. And I still love spinach. I'm always begging Kat to make me some spinach.
Let's talk about Gentle Ben. I have a 1968 vintage lunchbox from the show. I've only watched a couple of episodes, so if I had to guess, on the back we have you and the bear. It appears you've set the forest on fire with your pyrokinetic abilities, and you've tackled the scared black bear fleeing from your rage.
Never heard that before, Dax, but that's a good one.
And then on the other side, we have the same bear who has now been beaten into submission, and you deliver added humiliation by flinging her babies at her while your family watches on. Does that about sum up the show?
Well, I don't really recall that episode, Dax, but you know, that's an interpretation of it. You know what? Wait, hang on one second. Just bear with me for 10 seconds. Hold on. Now, this might give you a cutaway for alternative programming, but you got yours. I have mine. Dueling lunchboxes. Yes, sir.
That's awesome.
Looking at it, and you know what? I never thought you listen. You're an observant young man. Yeah, I literally seem like I'm throwing this bear cub at Ben, and Ben doesn't really look happy. Looks like, and Dennis is kind of pointing. Everybody's making fun of Ben. Yeah. And let's see, hold
Yeah.
on. And in the front, yes. And oh, the poor deer in the background. And Jesus, this is nasty. This is really nasty. Now, did yours have a, oh, mine doesn't have, mine, somebody stole the thermos out of mine. There are thermoses that come.
Yeah,
You
we
have a
don't have a
thermos?
thermos. We don't.
Yeah, we don't either. Well, that's interesting. This, wow. You want to see something? I've never looked at this one.
Hmm.
This kit is the property of Rusty Cole in Duncan, Oklahoma. Duncan, Oklahoma was Mom's hometown. So somehow over the years, somebody, Rusty or Rusty's mom probably stole it from Rusty and ended up giving it to Mom, and Mom now owned it. It's pretty amazing. So, you know, anyway, so yeah, the Gentle Ben, that, yeah, there's a board game. There were a couple of board games that got invented. The show was actually only on for 2 years. We did 2 seasons, and I'm proud of the shows. We, you know, of course, you know, in a television show, you make, back in those days, we did 26 or 28 episodes a season. And, you know, in television, you're going to make, you know, hopefully 4 or 5 really good episodes. And you're going to make 2 or 3 clunkers. But then you're going to go ahead and make a lot of really solid episodes. And we felt like that we did on Gentle Ben. And it was wonderful. And I'll tell you what, just recently, I had the experience of spending a little time with a fellow named Rico Browning. Now, if you look by your microphone there, Rico Browning was the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now,
Oh, that's cool.
Now, what he also was the creator of Flipper. And another thing he was a director on Gentle Ben. Rico Browning, that fellow who climbed into that green wetsuit and swam around in Creature from the Black Lagoon, he probably directed 10 or 12 episodes of Gentle Ben. And he was the nicest guy in the world. He was one of the nicest men that I've ever met, besides my dad. And we had Kat and I had a chance to go visit Rico, along with our daughter Rafa. And he's doing well. He's getting old, like people who were adults in the early 60s, you know, are. But he's doing really well. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to reminisce about working with him on Gentle Ben. And also Rico Browning and I also worked together when I was a little bit older. When I was about 14 years old, I did a movie down in Florida that Rico directed called Salty, which, you know, after he had had the success of Flipper and then he had worked on Gentle Ben, he invented the idea of trying to make a flipper, but instead of a dolphin, you make it with a sea lion. And so we did this movie called Salty, and I think you can find it on eBay or, you know, somewhere on the internet. Mark Slade is in it. A guy named Julius Harris is in it. An actress named Nina Foch is in it. And so that's me when I was about 14 years old, working with Rico. And it was a wonderful time. Being down in Florida with my dad for huge hunks of the year, both when I was, you know, 7, 8, 9 years old. Memories that just are precious to me.
You played the character Mark Wedlow, the son of a wildlife officer in the Florida Everglades. Your father was played by the actor Dennis Weaver. Is it true you and your brother wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Dennis Weaver?
Well, I think there's a pretty good chance. There's certainly a huge heaping dose of kismet involved in that, because Dennis went to the University of Oklahoma. And Dennis was from Kentucky, I believe, but he ended up going to the University of Oklahoma to study drama. He was a couple of years older than Mom and Dad. So he was an upperclassman. He was a senior when Dad was a freshman and Mom was a sophomore. And Mom and Dad were both in the theater program at University of Oklahoma, and they took classes there. They took drama classes. And one of the classes was being done by the upper division, you know, student, Dennis Weaver. And it was a scene study class. Dennis matched my mom and dad they cold reading, you know, you just got to pair up actors. He's like, here, you do this character, and here you do this character. And it was Dennis, matching mom and dad together. And no one's quite sure whether that was literally the first time they had met, but it was the first time they had been together by themselves, was studying these scenes together. And, you know, sparks flew, and there was, you know, they immediately had a torrid romance. So if it wasn't for Dennis, no, Ron and I probably, you know, there's a pretty good chance we wouldn't have been born, or at least not in the form that we've been born at. I mean, that's a $5 question there, Dax, is if that didn't happen, would that have happened? If that didn't happen, would that have happened? And we don't know. I don't know how things like that work. But yeah, Dennis was instrumental. And it was really odd. It was really odd to get the TV series. And it reunited Dad and Dennis. And also, Dennis was married for over 50 years to a wonderful lady named Jerry Weaver. And Jerry and Dennis and mom and dad were always very close. And Dennis had 3 sons, I believe, Rusty, Rick, and, oh, I'm brain locking. Rusty, Rick, and, you got me. But anyway, they were generally, Rusty was close to my age. And I know Rick was a little older, and the middle kid was Ron's age. And in fact, you know, Ron and they, you know, we always sort of were very friendly, and we knew each other for years and years and years.
Well, you told me about your early work with Disney and meeting the legend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, you know, the meeting with Walt Disney is really simply very fleeting. But I had done the voice of Roo in Winnie the Pooh. And when Winnie the Pooh was a featurette, it wasn't like a full-length animated feature, but it was a feature. It was just like, I don't know what it was. It was an hour long, or maybe less than that. So
That might be
voice.
considered a short film.
Yes, probably so. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've seen it, and I've heard myself, and I was cute. So I did that. And then my agent got a call. Nobody was calling me at the time. I was 6 years old, you know. So, but Disney was doing a huge animated feature called The Jungle Book, and they wanted me to play a little role. And I played the baby elephant in The Jungle Book, and it involves some singing and some marching, and it was just only a handful of lines. But I remember going into the Disney, on the Disney studio lot, went to the scoring stage, which that means that's where they do all the recording of the music. The orchestra can set up and record there, and they can do all their serious recording there in this recording stage. And they were getting me to sing, and it was pretty complicated because I'm rhythm challenged and tone deaf. Always have been, and I'll probably always will be. And they were being very patient with me, and I was doing my job, and I saw a figure walk into the engineer's booth, and I'm not clairvoyant. The reason why I could see somebody walk into the engineer's booth is because there's a big piece of glass. The engineer's room is a 3-sided room, and there's a big piece of glass that connects so the engineers can look into the recording stage. So they could look in, I could look in and see them. And I saw Walt Disney walk into that recording, into the engineer's room. And I knew it was Walt right away because I was a Disney baby. I had been taken in a stroller to Disneyland. I was an infant the first time I went to Disney. Mom and dad probably took me to Disney, 50 times in my childhood. So anyway, I identified that was Walt. I was excited. And then a second later, I saw a set of eyes peering through a little glass window that separated the engineer's room from the recording stage. There was a big door, and then there was a little tiny window that was cut into that big door. And I saw eyes peering in to make sure that there wasn't any recording going on, and there wasn't. and the door of the recording stage opened slowly. Walt Disney was there in the flesh. He took one step into the room, into the scoring stage. He looked right at me. He gave me a wave and said, "You're doing a fine job, Clint." And he, you know, and I'll never forget that. And, you know, it was like, wow. You know, he didn't invite me to his personal lunchroom for lunch or anything, but he made contact with me. And it was a wonderful experience. And that's, you know, my experiences with Disney have been remarkable. You know, I got to fly on his airplane later on. After he passed away, the studio was being run by a guy named Ron Miller, who was Walt's son-in-law. And while Ron Miller was running Disney, I got an opportunity to work on a movie called The Wild Country with Vera Miles and Steve Forrest, and also my brother. Ron and I played brothers for the only time in our careers together. We played brothers in a film for Walt Disney, and not the Walt Disney, but Walt Disney Studios. And it was a wonderful experience in like 1969. And we filmed in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then when we were finished filming in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and getting ready to fly back to LA to continue our work at Disney Studios, we were invited to fly home on the Mickey Mouse. And that was Walt's private plane. And it was, you know, what a wonderful experience that was, to think, you know, here we were. I mean, flying is awesome anyway, but here I was sitting in Walt Disney's airplane. Wow.
Here's your high school graduation photo, and you're wearing sandals on your feet.
Yes.
How much of your high school experience do you think it informs who you are today?
Well, listen, that's a great picture. That's awesome. I have a little version of that picture somewhere here in the office. Yes. Well, of course, I'm wearing thongs, right? Wearing sandals. And of course, that's the one thing you couldn't do. You could not, they wouldn't let you graduate if you had thongs. Well, I was feeling pretty confident about myself, so I decided I'd wear a pair of thongs. They were not going to deny me because I was wearing thongs. So I walked up on stage and got my diploma. My high school life, how it informed me. You know, actually, to be honest, Dax, junior high school was probably as important to me as high school. But I do have a lot of great memories. Of course, there's boy-girl memories that happen in high school. You know, there's kind of trying to date, trying to be social, and all that stuff. So, you know, yeah, I think back about my high school days all the time. You know, wonderful memories too. You know, I played high school baseball. When I was a junior, I was on the high school varsity team. I was a pitcher. I wasn't one of the main guys, but I was on the team the whole year, and I pitched, and I got the trophy. I was the most inspirational. And again, here's one. This doesn't happen today. We were the Burroughs Indians. That was the name of our team, was the Indians. And Burroughs High School, it wasn't until like last year did they change the name from the Indians to the Bears. So anyway, you know, junior high school was probably more valuable to me, but they both had their own impression. Those experiences both left the, you know, same impressions on me. Or, you know, let me back up. My junior high school period, which is 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, very much a formative period of my life. And then in a different way, high school, very informative period in my life. And I had a journalism teacher in junior high school. His name was Mr. Campbell, Steve Campbell. And Steve Campbell was extremely important in my life because he was the best teacher I ever had by a mile. He just recently passed away, and I was very fortunate to sort of reconnect with him. We'd always remained relatively friendly to each other over the years, but yet towards the end of his life, he was alone. He was single again. You know, he had been married and he's single. And Steve and I became close. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience to get to be with him because, you know, he was a powerful educator, a great teacher, but even a better man. He was just a great dude. So that was my junior high school experience. And then, you know, high school, probably a little more hijinks than I would like to admit.
So I have a photo of you and the Kempsters, Clint Howard and the Kempsters. In the early 1980s, you formed a punk rock band called Clint Howard and the Kempsters.
Yes.
You are one of several What's Under the Bed guests who had a punk rock band. I've listened to the music and your band was good. When listening, I was reminded of Richard Hell and the Voidoids in that era. And your guitarist was phenomenal. Do you think more songs have been written about love, lust, or heartbreak?
Songs written about love, lust, or heartbreak. Oh, wow. I would say equal parts. I would say, you know, love, everybody's searching for love. I mean, there's somebody wrote a song about that. I mean, you know, lust. Oh, people have written songs about that. Heartbreak Hotel. You know, those three things, in all seriousness, those three things are at the core of the human existence. I think people that don't have a lust for love or lust or heartbreak. Wait, hold on. That I just said it wrong. I don't believe anybody lusts for heartbreak. I think heartbreak happens because you yearn for love. It's a great question, Dax. And, you know, I didn't write songs about love, lust, or heartbreak. You know, that wasn't Scott and I's approach to that. Hold that picture up again real quick. See, my musical partner, the long-haired guy, 2 people from me, you know, that guy, Scott Green, he was my best friend. We became friends in the 2nd grade. And we were best buddies all through life. I still talk to him once in a while. And he's moved on. You know, he lives his life with his kids, and you know, we're living our lives here in Burbank. And the fellow you said was a superior guitar player. There's Sabino, the man directly to my right. But no, directly to my right.
That one.
No, that's Tony the drummer.
That one. There we go.
Yeah, there's Sabino. Great guitar lick. Great. Oh man, he was awesome. Nice guy too. I talk to him all the time. But Scott and I wrote the songs, and it was angry young man music. We were celebrating being angry young men. We didn't try to do anything outside of our wheelhouse, you know. So Angry Young Man did songs called Panoramic Romance, which had nothing to do with romance. You know, it's just, I kind of am a half-baked poet, and we would come up with interesting, you know, Scott would build a song musically, and I would fill in with my lyrics, a little bit like Morrison and the Doors, although I don't even want to use me and Morrison in the same breath because that's ridiculous. But the Kempsters was a huge part of my life. I enjoyed it. It was a little toxic, drank way too much liquor, you know, imbibed too much. It was, you know, in that way, it was sort of sad. But thank God that, you know, I didn't, you know, end up with my pants down around my ankles and a needle in my arm. That didn't happen. I'm very grateful for that. But Scott and I had this experience for 3 years. We had that band. We played around at a lot of local clubs and stuff. And, you know, the one thing that Scott and I promised ourselves is that we were not going to compromise. We were going to do what we wanted to do. We did not try to set out to write songs that the whole world was going to enjoy. We wanted to set out to write songs that we would enjoy and that we could be proud to play our friends. And our friends were a, you know, funky bunch of people, you know, so that, you know, we were not mainstream at all, didn't care. In fact, if we ended up catching ourselves heading towards the mainstream, we veered. We veered quickly. So it's great that you brought that picture up. That's awesome. Thanks, Dax.
As a child actor, you performed the voice of several Disney characters, which we've previously mentioned, but your voice work continued as an adult. Many people would be surprised to know you have voice work in the films Youngblood and Apocalypse Now. What did you do in Apocalypse Now, and what other films can we hear you in?
Well, later on in life, I worked, Rob Zombie did an animated movie, El Super Bisto, I believe is the name of it. I might mess up, somebody would have to look it up, but Rob, very creative guy. He hired me to do some voices in that movie. I did, God, you're putting me on the spot because I really haven't done too much. And Youngblood was not a voiceover. Youngblood,
Oh.
I did voices in Youngblood. Youngblood was a movie that Rob Lowe was the star of, and it was a hockey movie. And they hired me to come in and do background voices to replicate being a hockey player. And me being a sports guy, it was easy for me to go back and lend my talents in that movie behind the scenes doing voices. But that was called for a period of time in the late 70s and 80s and even into the early 90s, I did voiceover work, and they call it group looping. And it's where they would bring actors in at the very end after they edited the movie. They would bring actors into the recording stage and sweeten the audio track by having us fill in background noises at very low levels. And for instance, in Apocalypse Now, I got hired by Fred Roos. Fred Roos was a confidant of Francis Coppola, and was also a confidant of George Lucas. Got hired to play a soldier. For 3 or 4 days, I was with 6 or 7 other actors, and they would go through the movie. And when the film editors found that there was a spot where they needed voices, they would have us add those voices. And in particular, there was a voice that they used me for that I'm prominent in, and that was when they're having the landing. Okay, when Robert Duvall wants to go surfing at the beach. Charlie, don't surf, that great sequence where they're doing the cavalry is landing. There's a kid that basically he has to push out of the helicopter. And that kid, he's right there at the edge of the helicopter door, and he's saying, I'm not going, I'm not going, I'm not going. It's words to that effect. And, they had a young actor who was playing that role, but he lived over in Europe, and they needed to redo the voice, but they weren't going to bring him all the way from Europe to do that voice. So they hired me to do that voice. And so they didn't hire me to do that voice. They hired me to do all sorts of voices. And then when they got to that point of the film, when they were talking about shooting those particular audio tracks, they sort of did a quick test. Who sounds like that guy? And my voice rang true to them. And so you can hear me in Apocalypse Now as that character in that moment. I'm not going, I'm not going, I'm not going. And then Robert Duvall just shoves me out of the helicopter.
Really quickly, I'm gonna pause the interview for a second. It's been 5 minutes. It's gonna be 5 minutes to an hour till it's been an hour during the interview. But I have quite a few more questions left. Is it okay if we go a little over an hour?
Well, sure, it would be great. And listen, some of this is on me because I'm a long-winded son of a gun. And I like to give long answers. And, in the world of podcasting, I just feel like we have an opportunity to talk. We're not up against any commercial breaks or anything. So, but yes, as a matter of fact, can we pause for just a second and let me go get some water?
Yes, of course.
Cool.
In 1984, the British band called The Damned released a song called Nasty and sung I Fell in Love with Video Nasty. The Video Recordings Act of 1984 in the United Kingdom imposed a stricter code of censorship on videos that was required of movies with a cinematic release. There were 72 titles affected by this code in the UK, and they were called video nasties. The first leading role was in the horror classic Evilspeak, which landed on the list of video nasties. This role was a departure from the family-oriented parts you were known for. Were you nervous about this new direction at the time?
Well, no, Dax, I wasn't nervous about the direction necessarily. I was nervous and anxious because it was a leading role. And, you know, I had been a child actor, but now all of a sudden I was getting, you know, this was a leading role in a feature. And, you know, well, you know, you might say I might have been a little bit nervous about it because I do recall having a conversation with Dad about it, and Dad's philosophy in situations like, well, you know, if you might not think the material is quite what you expect you were going to do, just don't worry. If you don't do the job, somebody else will. That's one thing that Dad would always say. And this was not pornography. Evilspeak was a movie. You know, The Exorcist had already come out. The good and evil is something that had been talked about, you know, for centuries. There's storytelling about good and evil. There was a movie called Carrie, which was about a young girl, Sissy Spacek at the time, who got tormented by people at school, and ended up this story got written that it was, you know, there was going to be hell to pay. And Evilspeak was sort of a male version of Carrie. And so given the opportunity to do it, it was, you know, I certainly was going to take the job. I see the poster in the background, which is cool.
Cool.
You know, wonderful experiences working on Evilspeak. The cinematographer, Irv Goodenough, who I worked with a few times over the course of my life in all sorts of interesting ways. I mean, you know, various little independent movies. Then all of a sudden I would come to find out that Irv's working on this movie. It was a wonderful experience. And we lost Irv a few years ago. He passed away prematurely, but Irv was a great guy. And the director, Eric Weston, a young filmmaker at the time, and Eric and I and Irv created sort of a trilogy of creative people that helped sort of shape the tone of that movie. And I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of the work, you know. And listen, it didn't get a great release, but I'll tell you, I have the newspaper clippings from Variety, you know, one of the trade papers in Hollywood, to prove it. It was the #1 movie in Los Angeles and New York City the weekend that it came out. So people did go to see Evilspeak, and people enjoyed it. And now later on, yes, it was dubbed a video nasty by the authorities in the UK. And we found that really, you know, kind of silly, because there had been movies that had talked about this material before, and there were things that Eric Weston directed into the movie that, in fact, when okay, here's a story. You know, the motion picture MPAA, they're the people that rate the movies. They give it either a PG or a PG-13 or an R or an X. They made Eric cut a few things out of the movie, or they would have given it an X rating. And in fact, Eric lobbied really hard. You know, Steven Spielberg made a movie that showed the same thing that Evilspeak showed, and he didn't get, excuse me, thanks, babe, thank you. That Evilspeak, my wife brings me smokehouse garlic bread. This is the best garlic bread in the world, bar none. Thank you, babe. God, what a wife. Jesus Christ. Oh, excuse me a second. We'll go over a minute or two. A Shirley Temple and smokehouse garlic bread. I've died and gone to heaven. But in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's a scene where there's a character pulls a heart out of another human being. They did it in Raiders of the Lost Ark, And when they did it in Evilspeak, they were threatening to slap Eric in the movie Evilspeak with an X rating. So Eric had to cut frame by frame. You know, like they showed more of it. They showed more of Bubba reaching into, or Sarge reaching into Bubba's chest and pulling out his heart. They were showing more of that in the movie originally, and they cut it down to where there's only just a few frames of that shot being seen. So anyway, sorry, I got a little distracted. It's garlic bread. In fact, excuse me 1 second. I'm gonna
Garlic bread.
I know this is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And as a professional entertainer, I should not. Smokehouse garlic bread. Oh man. Okay, carry on.
Evilspeak is about a student who is relentlessly bullied. In a world where kids are dealing with bullies, active shooter drills, and COVID lockdowns, do you think horror movies can offer catharsis to these real world horrors?
No. Listen, I think all movies have a place. I think that movies it is an art of a certain kind. It's entertainment, it's an expression. And this is just my opinion. I think that movies ought to be made because they creatively give an opportunity for creative people to do something that's entertaining. And messages may come out. Here's the problem with trying to make a message movie is people interpret things all the time wrong. People will think there's a message in something, and that's not what the creative people wanted you to think, you know? So I'm always a little leery of the message, because you might be able to deliver the message to the people, but like I said, people are going to interpret it their own way, you know, and I don't know. Again, it's a really good question, but I don't necessarily think, horror movies. I think horror movies are just a form of entertainment. I just think it's sort of, a little, yes, it's a little nasty. It's a little, honest to God, Dax, it's not my favorite form of movies. I mean, I don't necessarily, I never have, and I don't believe I ever will really fully in my brain go, God, I can't wait to see another horror movie. It's just that's just not how my brain works. I have my own set of tastes, and it doesn't necessarily include, watching fake bloodbaths. I just don't. So again, I said no to your question, and I kind of believe no, but people are going to interpret, or they're going to interpret things that just aren't there. Like, for instance, back to an earlier question, when you ask about if there's anything that scared me when I was a kid, and I brought up the idea of the painting of a clown creeped me out. Well, I don't believe that the artist who created the first oil painting of a clown was thinking in his mind, I'm going to create something that's going to freak a child out. I don't believe that. I think the guy was just trying to paint a really nice painting of an artist in a clown outfit. Now, my God, if that guy was thinking, I'm going to do a painting that's going to freak a child out, well, shame on him. But I don't think that was the case at all.
Let's talk about your role as the misunderstood Gregory Tudor. So I'm pronouncing that right? Tudor. Okay, good. In your film Ice Cream Man, did you keep one of the heads?
Oh yeah, it's in the hallway. I don't want. We should have done a movie called Garlic Bread Man. No, but yeah, no, I did. Back in the early 90s, I had an opportunity to work on Ice Cream Man. And Norman Epstein was the director, and it was a little independent movie. And they called my agent and said, would I be interested in considering this role? And I did, because at the time, I like gainful employment. I still like gainful employment. And, I met with Eric. I mean, not Eric. I met with Norman. Seemed like a nice guy. It was kind of this fun little quirky, cheesy horror movie. I mean, we knew what we were making. We knew what we were making when we made it. I mean, it's not serious. It's not The Exorcist. It's not Long Day's Journey into Night. It's a little cheesy horror movie, Ice Cream Man. And so, I took the job, and I'm very grateful. And over the years, it is amazing to me. It is amazing that the Ice Cream Man resonates with such a large population. And there are just, literally thousands of people over my career have come up to me and have this genuine conversation with how much that movie meant to them. And, I'm honored. I'm really, truly honored.
I enjoyed it a lot. It was a very enjoyable film.
It's a fun movie to watch,
It's bananas in the fun way.
Yes, it's cute. It's it's somewhat silly. That's one of these movies that people read into it things that I know that it wasn't designed to have stuff read into it. It was designed to just be a fun little horror romp. And in fact, this gives me the opportunity, Norman Epstein and I are working on doing another Ice Cream Man movie where I'm going to play the Ice Cream Man again. It's not necessarily going to be a sequel or a continuation or a reboot. It is just going to be Norman and I getting a chance to do another horror movie together, and it will be Ice Cream Man. And Ice Cream Man 2023 is our goal. We're creating the script. We're trying to find the best possible ways to use all of our assets, all of our fun stuff. I'm not going to let any cat out of the bag here or anything, but we've come up with some really wonderful, fun stuff. And as I've gone around and appeared at horror conventions and things and mentioned that we are, proposing to do another Ice Cream Man movie, the expression on people's faces it's amazing. It's unbelievable. And I'm grateful. And certainly it's a goal that Norman and I have.
Yeah, you mentioned at Carolina Fear Fest, and I was like, that's a thing? That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun. And the Ice Cream Man that roamed the neighborhood in Burbank when Ron and I were kids, he was an older guy. Of course, I'm not going to play that guy that's directly to your right. I can't play a 35-year-old Ice Cream Man, but I can play a 60-year-old Ice Cream Man. And Mickey, Mickey? Oh boy, I'm brain locking on his name again. The Ice Cream Man that we had, I'll never forget him. He had an old, crummy old truck. It was everybody has the experience with their Ice Cream Man in their neighborhood over the years. And so I think that's one thing that Norman originally sort of landed on, and it resonates with people. And that is that story of a character driving around the neighborhood, almost like the Pied Piper, luring kids down the street to get sweet treats. It's there's something very simple and something very poetic about it.
You appear in 4 projects from Rob Zombie. You mentioned one of them, but it's also including Halloween, Lords of Salem, and 3 from Hell. Do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
Oh, Lord. Well, you can't have the zombies be too fast, because then you can't film them correctly. The slow moving zombie. Of course, the classic zombie movie was the black and white one, where they used a lot of chocolate syrup. The Night of the Living Dead.
Living Dead, yes.
Yeah, Night of the Living Dead. That's the first horror movie that I saw. And they were relatively slow zombies because it was a B movie and you couldn't shoot them fast. I'm not a big fast guy. I cinematically, I think you got to have them move slow and deliberate and build in the facts into the story that that make it so, you know, they don't have to, they'd be slow and methodical, not, you know, they're not little lizards. Zombie, my kind of zombie is not a lizard zombie. My kind of zombie is the slow lumbering zombie that has that expression on their face.
You have so many memorable appearances in Adam Sandler movies, and you can be seen with Mike Myers in the Austin Powers series and The Cat in the Hat. You've made your mark in some of your brother's best films like Apollo 13, The Missing, Cinderella Man, and Frost Nixon. It's no wonder MTV honored you with their Lifetime Achievement Award. We have a picture of it right here. The award may have started as a goof. I know Chewbacca and Godzilla were awarded before you. You tell in your book how you gave a straight acceptance speech and described how you won the crowd over. You certainly did, but I would argue the crowd was always with you. Generations of fans love you and love your work. You were a beloved actor in so many of our favorite films. MTV retired the award because there was no way to top your appearance. Like,
well, geez, thank you. And yes, and yes, and yes. I, you know, I remember when my agent called me and said they had the MTV Movie Awards people contacted them and they wanted to give me the Lifetime Achievement Award. And in fact, that particular phone call happened on April Fool's. And I remember saying to my agent at the time, Daryl, I says, don't fuck with me, Daryl. You know, I know what day it is. Don't tell me, don't try to do an April Fool's on me. And he says, no, they're serious. They really want to give you the Lifetime Achievement Award. And my immediate reaction was yes, because my immediate reaction was at the time, which I don't know, what year was it? 1998? 97?
Probably. I didn't memorize the.
Yeah. And I think it was right around there.
I think so.
See, I was still an actor, really trying to get work. And I wanted to, I wanted to maximize my career at the time. And it was going to be a wonderful opportunity for me to get seen by a large group of people. And I equated it to like running an ad in the Variety newspaper. I just felt like this is an opportunity for me to get some free press. So I immediately said yes. And then, you know, right away I started writing my acceptance speech, because it wasn't like I didn't know. Of course I knew what it was. And of course I knew this is going to be my opportunity to have a couple of minutes in front of the country. And so I wrote a speech, an acceptance speech, and I immediately went over to Dad's house and I read it to him. And Dad said, that's not quite right. You didn't do it right. And I says, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, those are funny jokes. You'll get laughs. If you read that speech, you will get laughs, but it won't be memorable. I'll never forget this, Dad. Dad says, listen, if you do it sincerely, if you accept this award sincerely, the public will love it and it will work for you. Because, you know, Dad had an instinct. The people did love me. They do love me. And I need to kind of play along with it, you know? Yes, granted, they gave it to Chewbacca the year before. They'd given it to Godzilla. They had also given it, I believe, to Richard Roundtree. So I was not the first just regular human being to get it. But okay, so they were going to honor me. So, you know, I wrote a heartfelt speech, tried to keep the jokes down to a dull roar. And I went and did it. And it was a heck of an experience. And I will, you know, I had so many things on my mind at that particular moment of being there, you know, including, truthfully, I needed to go to the bathroom real bad. So I went to give my speech. I was literally, as you know, we all men know, you know, literally kind of trying to hold it in while I was doing this speech. And I'll tell you, I can give you a short version of this story, Dax. I'm a very spiritual guy, and I was praying I was praying all night. I said, God, please don't let me throw up on myself, because this was live. This was a live thing. I wasn't going to have a chance to have any redos. I was going to have to do, this was going to be a one-time thing. And I was praying to God, please don't let me screw up. Please don't let me throw up on myself. And so now I had no idea how the program was going to go. And let me back up for 1 second. David Bowie, since I first heard him when I was about 17 years old, David Bowie was always a huge, huge impact on me. It's one character, one human being I never had the opportunity to work with or meet, and I wish that would have happened, but it just didn't. But I did meet David Bowie through his music, and I somehow have a cosmic connection to David Bowie. Always have, always will. So anyway, that's all I need to back up. So I'm there, I'm waiting, I'm in the audience. I know my segment's going to come up, and I'm praying. And the segment before mine was Jacob Dylan. He got up on stage and performed a musical number for the audience, and it was Heroes by David Bowie. So as I was reaching my pinnacle of being nervous, all of a sudden I hear the downbeat and I hear the first notes of one of David Bowie's best songs was Heroes. And for the 3 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever it was that Jacob Dylan and his band, I believe they were the Wallflowers, they performed this version of Heroes, I was lost in the music. I was captured by David Bowie's music. And the song ended, and the next thing I heard was my Martin Landau saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, Clint Howard." And I got up, I was on cloud 9. I got up out of my chair. I walked up on stage. I gave my speech. I didn't throw up. And thank God that it was like that. And I'm very grateful.
So we have a couple last questions.
Sure.
First, you have a photo right here. How did you discover the world of snow globes?
I have no idea. You know what? Dioramas seemed a little simplistic to me. I was at a point in my life where I'd had my second hip operation, and I was not going to be able to play golf any longer. It was just, I had played competitively for a long time, and I couldn't play the way I wanted to play. So I needed to do something with my time. And I have a garage in my backyard, and I set up a little shop in my garage. And I literally was thinking I should start making dioramas, and it just seemed a little simplistic. Dioramas, just what is it? A little scene inside of a box, and you do little models. It just doesn't seem like that popped. And I don't know what it was. I don't know whether I saw it on the internet. I don't know whether I looked at a snow globe and said, I can do that. I don't want to make something up that I don't really remember doing, but I landed on the idea of making a snow globe, which of course, technically I'm not making the snow globe. I'm making the things that you put inside of a snow globe. I happened to find an outfit on the internet that sold the kits where, they make the glass ball is already made, and all you do is they give you the instructions on what to glue on the inside of the snow globe and how to do it. And I bought a couple of snow globe kits on the internet. I come to realize that the guy who's selling these snow globe kits on the World Wide Web lives about 10 minutes from my house. And so I went over and I talked to him, and he gave me a few little tips, and I started making snow globes. And the first one I made was the characters from Star Trek, my first episode, Commander Baylock and the puppet. And I put those characters under glass, and there is just something magical about a sphere filled with water. It's just, it's just something really magical. And I think I made 23 or 24 of them. I've taken a little bit of a pause, but I'm sure I'm going to make some in the future. In fact, I know I'm going to make some in the future. It's just a matter of time. I've never sold any of them. I have my own philosophy. To me, it's my expression. It's my art. I make little political statements, or I make social statements. If somebody says, make one of this, if somebody says, and I've had this plenty of times, oh, you should make one, a snow globe. No, in fact, by you even mentioning it probably means I will never make one with that subject, because it's always off the top of my head that I come up with one. Like, for instance, I made one, I wanted to do a big one. I wanted to do one that was really tall, and, you know, where the base was tall. And so I said, well, what am I going to put in one when I have a really tall base? And that is, well, I'm going to put one of a guy looking down, and he's looking down, and he's paranoid, and he's looking down at the people on the ground, and he's pointing down to the people staring at him. And it's, I see you down there. That's the name of the snow globe, is I see you down there. And it's a guy in his own ivory tower staring down at the crowd below. So anyway, those are the kind of things that pop into my head. And for several years, it's been a wonderful release. I've given a couple of them away. One of my favorite ones that I've given away, and she is resting beautifully well in San Antonio, Texas. And that is Windy the Window Washer. And it's a woman inside of the snow globe up on a ladder with a squeegee, squeegeeing the inside of the snow globe. So, you know, those are the kind of things that I've done. I've done a couple for my brother, and I did one for my sister, Cheryl, my stepsister. I call her my sister. So anyway, there it is. Well, if you would have given me a little more prep, I could have pulled one of my ones out and showed it to you, but we're getting a little late in the day here. Maybe you know what, Dax, we might need to do this again. We might need to come back and do another podcast here in a few months where we have an opportunity to talk even further. Because listen, I know we've been talking for over an hour, but we've only just scratched the surface.
So I have one last question before I'll let you go.
Okay, and I'm going to take one more bite of garlic bread as you ask the question.
More bite of garlic bread. This last question is a Sophie's choice. Two must die so that one may live. Music of David Bowie, 7-Eleven Slurpees, or jacuzzis.
Okay, I don't want to screw up the answer. What was the preface of the question?
So the last question is a Sophie's choice. Two must die so that one may live. Which was music of David Bowie, 7-Eleven Slurpees, or jacuzzis.
Well, okay, 7-Eleven Slurpees is that doesn't even count. I mean, person should just, yeah. I've lived without the jacuzzi. You know, okay. Music lives on. David Bowie is etched in my heart. He's etched in my soul. That man was absolutely brilliant. But my God, oh, if I couldn't get in my jacuzzi, I'd be SOL. You can't do this to me, Dax. You can't do this to me. You know, just selfishly, we got to keep the jacuzzi. We got to keep the jacuzzi. My bones are just too achy. My bones just too achy. I need my jacuzzi. Please, can we reconsider just one die? We'll take, we can kill two Slurpees. We can kill a cherry Slurpee and we can kill a cola Slurpee. No?
No, I refuse.
No, you know what? No, then David Bowie must never die. David Bowie must never die.
Achy bones it is.
Yeah.
Well, it was amazing talking to you. Is there anything you want to ask me before we are done?
Yeah, where'd you get that shirt?
Internet. We found it. We found it on the internet. It's amazing. It doesn't show because the chair's too low, but yeah, it's your face.
Yeah. No, well, listen, I don't know. Dax, I met you a couple months ago at a month and a half ago, or whatever, at a horror convention, Carolina Fear Fest. You seem like a really nice dude. You must have great parents, because nobody accidentally becomes a good human being like you've become, obviously, and let's not get silly about this. You should always honor them. You should always, because your upbringing has given you what you are, and that is, you're a good dude, and I hope this is only the first of many times. Your dad seems like a pretty nice guy too, but we took a liking to you when you first came up to the table the first time that we met you, Kat and I. And of course it was going to be a yes. Here's a young guy who's trying to do something, and I certainly want to help. I certainly wanted to help. And you have far exceeded any expectations I had of this podcast. You were prepared. You did really well, and you kicked butt. So I'm proud to consider you a friend and a colleague.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. So you have in 2020, hopefully in 2023, you have Ice Cream Man. Where exactly can people find you?
Well, okay. I have an Instagram page that my wife, Kat, she's sort of the CEO around here, and she we run it together, but it's CLINT HOWARD Official. People can tune in to my comings and goings, and it's not just a fan page. It's a friend page, it's a family page, and I love expressing stuff on Instagram, so people can see me there. I do have a Facebook page. I'm also going to be in a movie that's coming out soon called The Old Way, that Nick Cage starred in, and Ryan Armstrong, a little girl in Firestarter. She's in The Old Way. So that's coming out sometime this summer. Looking forward to that, because it's a good size role, fun movie. It's a Western, good opportunity for me. So I got that coming out, and just keep paying attention. And as far as information goes, the best way to keep tabs on me is through Instagram, CLINT HOWARD Official.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of this interview. It really was an honor.
No, my pleasure. My seriously, and the words I said were not BS. It's awesome. Great to meet you. Great to collaborate with you on this podcast, and good luck with it. And let me know when it drops.